I want to welcome everybody. Please give yourselves a round of applause for being somewhere instead of a Zoom screen.
All right.
I really appreciate those of you who came, who don't feel under duress because I gave you an assignment to do so. But I appreciate all of you being here. I think you're going to learn a lot today. This is the art of the guitar. And I want to take a moment to introduce the respondents here. I will be moderating this event, and this event came about because I was talking to Professor Dempsey last year, and I was talking about how it would be cool to do something about the guitar, where we got guitarists to play, and everybody talking about different styles, and then it came together. It happened, and now that it's here, I want to make sure we take full advantage of it and that we learn as much as possible. I don't want to. We have a lot of different folks here play a lot of different instruments, so I don't want to try and say that the guitar has a special magic to it, but the fact that the guitar is used in so many different styles and so many different ways, electrically, acoustically, in rock and heavy metal and jazz and classical, in all these different forms of music, and I just named a few of them, has really opens up a lot to talk about the art of playing it, the art of thinking about it, the art of your approach to it, and the art of how it plays into performance. And that's how this event came together. And so we were very lucky to get our respondents together for this event, who are three people that have a lot of experience playing the guitar, as well as teaching the guitar. And so I will just start off from the far there. Dr. Kim Perlak is the
Thank you.
Is the head of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music. And has a remarkable experience with the guitar, and she's going to introduce a little bit of it herself because we're going to get into a little bit into people's histories. But we are very welcome. We want to welcome her because she's coming all the way from Boston for this event, and we're very grateful for her to do so. So if you're like, oh man, I had to walk all the way over to the E building, well, she came all the way from Boston, right? So, and then in the middle we have Professor Tom Dempsey.
Yeah.
Professor Dempsey has an extensive history with the guitar, which we will explore today, and is also the program director for the music performance program. And he will be one of the professors who will be helping oversee our concert, because I forgot to mention our concert before I introduce Kevin. I have to say, hold on, that on Tuesday, June 7th, we have our student spring showcase, but I got everyone's attention with that beginning. So we got our student showcase for the music program on Tuesday, June 7th. It is in the Little Theater. And I have to say that generally the reports I get back from students is after they see one of these students' concerts, they say, I have no idea that's what students were doing at LaGuardia, and I wish I had attended these events more. So I hope you take advantage of this now to see. We have the music club, some of who are representing here, and many other of the college's ensembles, including the ensemble class performing. And while we have the ensemble class, I can introduce Professor Kevin McNeal.
Yeah.
Professor Kevin McNeal, also with an extensive history of guitar. In fact, an early teacher of Professor Dempsey, if I have correctly. So this.
That is true.
Keep in touch with your students, because you'll never know when you'll be working together again, or keep in touch with your teachers, I should say, because you never know when you'll be working together again. And he is also the leader of the ensemble here at LaGuardia, as well as a teacher of the guitar class sometimes and other classes as well. So, and I am Professor Will Fulton. I will be moderating today's event. Thank you. And I look forward to hearing and talking about guitar. And so I'm going to start out with a question for Kim, for Professor Perlak. And that question is, if you could tell us a little bit about your journey as a guitarist, what led you to guitar, and how your journey began.
Okay. Hi, everyone. In the very beginning, my mom was a piano teacher. And she had a lot of students that came to our house, and I was pretty shy, and I didn't like the idea that you could hear it when I practiced, as a kid. So I'd be like, I'm done, and she'd be like, you're not done, And the guitar it just looked was really cool. My dad had all these records from when he was, his roommate was like a college radio station DJ, so we had all these guitar records and stuff. And so I got a guitar when I was 10 and started taking lessons. And it's funny because Will was saying, like, what are some of the things that you first learned on the guitar, and did they influence you? So this is the first thing that my teacher taught me. There was a Muppet movie at the time and there was a song called The Rainbow Connection, and he taught me this. He goes, and as I would walk down the street, the strings that you play are 6, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 6, 3, 2, because then you put your first finger down. And he used to drive his car really slow as I was walking to my parents' car and sing it out the window, 6, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 6, 3, 2, right? And what I thought was so cool was a couple things with like the open strings of the guitar, the way they ring, and how one note could make everything sound really different. And so I realized there's like this piece I'm writing now that I'm starting to write music, and the beginning of it goes like this. And I realized this morning, well, that uses open strings, and then the idea of changing to this, it's really not that different you know what I mean? Right? And then, so then I had these great teachers. The first teachers I had were actually in this musician, Arlo Guthrie. Woody Guthrie was his father, American music. I didn't really put it together when I was 10 that's what they were doing, but that's who those guys were. They were those guitar players, and I don't know, they went on the road or whatever. I got another teacher who had a classical background, and she started teaching me like any rock tune that used your fingers, because she was trying to make me change over to classical guitar. So of course I learned like, oh wait, no, sorry, right? Right, Stairway to Heaven. So, Stairway to Heaven. Wow, sorry, I can't believe can you believe it? Right, and then, so that isn't all that different than this other piece, I guess. I'm writing this piece and it kind of goes like this. Same chord as Stairway to Heaven. You know, like, so, and I'm like, oh, it's in there. Like, it's all in there somewhere, right? When it goes in, it doesn't come out. So,
I think that's a really good way of thinking about the journey, right? That here you are, you're talking about the first piece you learned, and then the most recent piece you're writing, or the first pieces you learned, and,
right.
it just all, we those things always come back to us, right? And so you're everything, I always try to get students to think about connections between things, and then not think of things as being different, but things as being connected, right? And then therefore to mine those connections a little bit. So that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Tom, can I pose that to you? I want you to think a little bit about your, those of us who study with you know where you are now, right. But where did it all begin? Where did the Tom Dempsey story begin?
A far away place. So my early recollections of the guitar, there were kind of two big influences for me. We called him my cousin. He wasn't really my cousin. He was like a distant cousin, who occasionally would play the guitar at some family gatherings. But probably the big thing that stood out for me, I'd always be over at my grandmother's house on a Saturday night, and she would have on this television program called Hee Haw. And Hee Haw, besides being this kind of quirky program, kind of centered around country music and things like that, it had some amazing guitar players on it. Roy Clark, Buck Owens, Chet Atkins would make appearances on there. This whole slew of guitar players. And I remember one time I was watching the show, and I'm just completely mesmerized by the guitar. And there was this guitar player came on who just had a hit out. His name was Glenn Campbell. And I remember being completely enthralled with, he was kind of singing and playing the guitar, but it was enthralling to me. And, and his big hit, Rhinestone Cowboy, had just come out, and I had the record. And
Cowboy.
yeah. And only to find out later that Glenn Campbell was an amazing studio guitar player, played all sorts of different styles, all sorts of different kinds of things. So that was kind of my first, kind of exposure to the guitar. I was talking with Sanchez earlier. I couldn't find a guitar teacher who would teach me until I was 8 years old. So the first instrument that I took up was actually violin. And so I played violin for only about 2 years because the orchestra teacher had a little bit of an anger management issue. And there was an incident with a music stand, and it was the 70s, things were different. So I didn't stay on the violin very long, but then kept with the guitar, and mostly kind of playing folk music, kind of strumming along. And my first gig was in the 6th grade playing at a first communion ceremony at our church, and I got paid $15, which, in 1981 was big bucks for, a 12-year-old kid. But then soon after that, they said, well, do you want to join the folk group? And I thought, well, I got to go to church anyways. So if I have to be there with my family, I might as well have the guitar in my hand.
That's why I was in the folk group too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so played, folk guitar. And then, obviously as I got older, I started to get into rock. But I actually grew up with a bunch of musicians who were all kind of getting into jazz at the same time. And some of them are still very well-esteemed jazz musicians today. But having that kind of core group of friends was, very helpful to me in, starting to get into jazz and playing out and stuff. So.
Thank you. Kevin, I wonder if I could pose this question to you, because I've always, we've always talked, but I don't think we've talked about how you got into the game, as it were, and how your journey began.
Hello, everyone. So I had I think I was maybe 6th or 7th grade. I had a singing group. I was in a singing group, and we used to sing along with the track. We would actually go out and do a performance, sing along with the track. Something went wrong on one of the gigs and performances, and so I had a friend who had a band, and they were all 12. We were all 12 years old, and I said, "Well, why don't you guys sing, and we will play behind you?" So after the rehearsal, I was like, "Wow, that's kind of neat. You guys know how to play instruments." After the rehearsal, one of the guitar players, I guess he was the bass player, he showed me how to play a song. And it was a song called Them Changes of Buddy Miles. I think it goes. And yeah. What's it? I forgot the rest of it. Yeah. And so he showed me this song, and I played it, and he said, "What?" He said, "Listen, here, take the guitar. Anybody can come off the street and just play a song after I just show you like that, and you can have the guitar. I'll get another one." He gave me his guitar.
That's amazing.
So I tried, I don't know what happened. I tried guitar lessons. For some reason, it didn't quite work out. And I just started practicing like on my own, by ear. So I couldn't play a song though, right? I was just trying to play riffs. So my mother was like, "Look, point that amp towards the window, because you can't play a song." So one day, guy knocks on my door. He says, "Hey, you sound pretty good. Why don't you come next door and we can play it?" So I was probably 14 then, and I go next door, and he was 17, and he said, and we started playing. I could not believe how good he was, and he said, I said, well, he said, listen, he had a Jimi Hendrix record called Band of Gypsies. He says, listen to this. And I said, well, wait, you sound like that. He was like, yeah, I know.
I know.
He's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know.
So he took me under his wing. We played, I ran into an old friend a couple of years ago, and he said, yeah, you know, when you were practicing with Benjamin, you guys played from sunup to sundown every day. And all I remember is we had chocolate chip cookies and milk all day long. That's why I have no teeth now. But it's like that's all we did. We just ate cookies, milk, and played guitar. And
You got your calcium, which is good.
Yeah, got something out of it. So yeah, and I had people all along saying, "Wow, okay, this." He says they would say like, "You know what? Hendrix is good, but you've got to hear Johnny Winter. Man, you got to hear Johnny Winter." Then another person would say, "Oh man, Hendrix is good, but you got to hear John McLaughlin." And then another person gave me, he says, "Yeah, but you got to hear Grant Green." So they gave me, somehow someone figured that what my temperament, I liked Hendrix, but I still liked blues. Blues was the common denominator. I liked, I really, the reason the kid next door liked what I played, because all I could play was B.B. King licks. So the blues was the common denominator that led me to jazz. And like, even like they're talking about folk, it's still Johnny, what's his name? From Hee Haw, the real not Glenn Campbell, the other one that you like. Roy Clark. Roy Clark, Glenn Campbell, blues. See? So country music is blues. Rock and roll is blues. You know, jazz, blues.
All right.
So
Great. So on this note, I wonder if we could ask you to play a little something. I wonder if we could ask you to give us a little something that a tune that either a tune that connects to your development or just any old tune
All
you
right.
want to play for us.
You know that Willie Dixon quote? Blues is the roots and everything else is the fruits.
that's great. Oh, good.
Blues is the roots,
Oh, yeah,
everything
I
else is the
understand.
fruits.
It's the fruits.
That's great.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, I guess I could play something that I wasn't going to play, but something that ties it in. This is one. I eventually got a guitar teacher, who he was a jazz guitar teacher, but he taught me how to play jazz blues. So this is one of the tunes that he taught me. It's called "Soft Winds." Not to get too far in the weeds, but a blues is, it's like a 12-bar structure. And one thing about this song is, it's a 16-bar blues.
Yeah. Nice.
Thank you. Well, and if I were to take a solo, it would be kind of like a. So I would still play blues even though it's jazz.
All right.
Nice. I like it.
So the last thing you said actually pivots nicely into my next question, and I'm gonna change. I did a little change of the order already, so I'm gonna continue with my change of the order, and I'm gonna talk to Tom for a second here, and I want to ask Tom about this. You know, students. Always ask me about what is the difference between jazz and blues, and talk about styles. So we have a number of different styles represented here, right? We've got students that play rock, students who play metal, students who play classical, play jazz, play blues. And so I guess the general question is, how do we think about style? How do you think about style as a guitarist, and how does it, how do you change styles or incorporate different styles into your playing? What's your relationship with the idea of style and genre?
Well, style is just, it's sort of the, it's like the musical environment that you are living in at whatever moment you happen to be playing. I feel like most guitar players, we have a language, hopefully, when we get to a certain level, there's a certain language that you've developed and an identity that you have as a player, based on, how you play chords, how you play single note lines. And that language that you have, just like we all have, language that we use, and we have ways of talking, and we have certain colloquialisms that we use, and certain kinds of things that we do sort of regularly. Some of you have taken my classes. Sometimes, smirk a little when I make a point about something, and then I say, "You dig?" And so we have certain things that we say that are part of our identity. So I think, as far as, there are certain things that we need to know kind of about playing certain styles, whether we're playing swing or, a straight eighth thing or a rock thing, or there's some things that are authentic. Like, for example, one of the things that, bossa nova and samba tunes and repertoire is very much kind of part of the larger umbrella of jazz. But I noticed a long time ago that a lot of jazz musicians, when they get ready to play bossa nova, approach it like a jazz musician and don't really approach it with sort of the traditional elements of bossa nova and samba. So, for example, bossa nova really comes out of samba. And there's a very kind of specific thing to do it authentically that you need to know. And the thumb is basically representing what the surdo drum would do in a samba band. Surdo drum is like a big bass drum kind of instrument. Mm-hmm. And also in bossa nova, the emphasis is on the second part of the beat as opposed to the first part of the beat, which will, like we might think of like, that would be the first part of the beat. But on bossa nova or samba, it's so the thumb needs to kind of be representing what the surdo drum would be doing, and the fingers need to represent kind of the syncopated parts of the beat. So to really play, that kind of music authentically, you need to know certain things. Just like you need to know certain things about how to play certain styles authentically. If you're playing a funk guitar part, or if you're playing Freddie Green style, it's a very which Freddie Green was a great guitarist in the Count Basie Orchestra, who really kind of pioneered this way of playing that is it seems simple because when you look at it, in a sort of not mundane is the wrong word, but it would, you can hear it always just strumming on all 4 bars. But it's a lot more than that. It's like the emphasis, right? It's like in the chords that so there's certain things that you need to know about those styles to play them authentically, that you get through experience. But ultimately, I think that, it's a combination of knowing that sort of those styles authentically and what makes them specific, but ultimately your own voice ends up coming out.
Yeah. I always think, as you're saying that, of this clip I once saw of Chuck Berry trying to show Keith Richards how to do one bend and saying over and over again, if you're going to do it, you're either going to do it right or forget it. We'll just walk out of here and not do it at all. And this idea that every little thing, is important to, if you think, well, it's just a bend, right? If it's important, then it's important. If it's music, then it's important. Kevin, I wanted to ask you the same question, but I also wanted to see if you could, as you think about style, if you could elaborate on what you said when you said, even though it's a blues, I'm playing jazz. So think about the relationship of those two terms in your mind, as well as just opening up the question a little bit in general.
Yeah, like, for instance, another reason that a lot of these styles they're derived from a dance, right? So sometimes, like, there might be a tough guy in the audience who's like trying to get his dance on, If you mess that beat up, you're gonna be in trouble. So, but no, really, see, a lot has to do, like Professor Dempsey mentioned, the colloquialisms and in the idioms, right? So you learn those idioms. And for me, like, I would say, okay, if I played another instrument, like if you play another instrument, I try to play bossa nova or samba on the drums. So then I take that and then I try and play it on the guitar, and now I just learned what the inner workings of that is. But I think that, let's see, when I play, if I'm playing jazz and I want to play blues, I would love to, I don't want to be the self that's watching myself, right? I want to be like reacting in real time. But I do want to be conscious enough not to be too idiomatic, right? I just want to kind of play in a blues style without playing blues licks, if you will, right? Once I saw some very marquee players, and I heard them playing, and I said, well, why did they do that? Why did they play that lick? And on the way home, I thought, well, okay, I know why they played it, because they wanted to bring the audience in. So there are mitigating circumstances, right, that change your like the way, like everybody's involved in this party here, and so. But what was the question again? If I go
Style. Just thinking about style in general. Different styles.
Yeah. So I guess the most natural answer for me would be to listen to a lot of different styles and hope it seeps into my subconscious, so that when I go out and play, that it's kind of embedded. And so listening is very important. Practicing is probably more important, but listening is really a lot of it. Because a lot of you might not even know how good your ear is. Like, you have a good ear, you don't quite know it yet.
I tell that to students all the time, that they don't think they know music if they're not. Those are students who aren't musicians or music students.
Right.
They come to class and they think, I don't know music.
Right.
And I tell you, you know a lot more about a lot of music than you'd ever give yourself credit for,
Yeah.
and a lot of music I don't know about, right?
Yeah,
So.
yeah, like V. Every time I hear him, he sounds better. I mean, if you can get better,
It has begun.
like 5% every time, every day.
Okay.
I mean,
Great.
he is my student, man.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to see if I can pose this question to Kim, and also Kim, to add on one thing to it without, I don't want to take away from what your answer would be anyway.
Okay.
But get you to also maybe just explain, because for the non-guitarists in the room might be noticing that you have an acoustic and they have an electric, and your strings look different than their strings, and talk a little bit about style, maybe, and if you could bring that in would be great, just to let them know.
Sure. I think when you think about style, there's a couple different things to think about. And the way I would ask you to consider it is think that there's stylistic authenticity. So every style has its roots, its history, its culture, and that feeds into the way you think about rhythm, the way you think about form, the way you think about melody. And like aesthetics, like what you care about with sound and tone, right? Does it need to be really clear? Can it be a little gritty? Like all those things matter to each style. And then there's personal authenticity, right? So there's you and what you care about. So for you, you may want to really sit at home in one particular style, but you're influenced by other things and you try to honor them. You can't just pull it in there. You can't dissect it. My friend used to say it's like a frog. It'll die in the dissection. So you have to be true, right? That was a friend. We all used to work for Tom, by the way, at a really wonderful guitar workshop. And that was our friend David Hamburger used to say that all the time. You have to honor the things you care about, right?
He worked with me, not for me.
Actually for him. Yes, we work together. So I think that's really important. I think you have to think about who you are, because you can't do everything, but you can respect everything and you can be open to everything. And then the things that you really want to pull into your language, you can pull in. And then if you have enough of a foundation musically on your instrument, because you've developed your ear and you've developed the skills that are required by your styles, then maybe you have enough foundation. If you want to pull something new in or go to somewhere new, you have a starting place. It might not be like in 5 minutes, but you have a starting place. And so in that regard, like this is a classical guitar. I'm going to hold it up so you can see. It's a little bit different. JD and I were talking about this because he's a classical guitarist. It's built like a cello. It's by a New York maker who's passed away. His name is Tom Humphrey. And he did it that way so that you could play up high and bring your thumb with you as you come up the neck. Isn't that cool? Also, on a guitar, the height of the strings over the soundboard, it gives it its volume. And when you make the neck like that, you slope the body down, and so you can be really loud. Yeah, I know, isn't that great? Sorry. I should have warned you, but yes, it can be really loud without, so that's kind of his idea. That was his idea. I think the other cool thing to look at is music history. So all these things that Kevin and Tom were talking about, you can start to learn about the intersections of style in other people's playing and in American history. And I want to throw out to you that you may not know that the very first music publication in the United States to be the best-selling music publication in the country was a guitar book. It was written by Justin Holland, spelled like the country, Holland. He was a Black American. He wrote the book during the time of slavery. He was free. He was born in Virginia, and when he was 14, his parents were worried because he had been born free, but they were worried he'd get kidnapped, so they sent him to Boston. And he met a bunch of musicians who were coming in different brass bands and got lessons from them. And Oberlin Conservatory in the 1840s was taking Black students, and so he went there. And he decided, I'm going to be a classical musician. Like, he didn't want to play popular folk music. He just wanted to be a classical guitarist. So he got hooked up with the Freemasons, who were able to get him music from Europe. And he translated everything. He had to learn to speak French and Spanish, which he did. I mean, talk about dedication. I think about that guy all the time. I'm like, oh my God, okay. And he wrote a book, and it's in the New York Public Library. You can get it. You can look at it. He wrote it in the 1870s. He finished it. It took him a long time. And then it was republished in 1893, and it was the bestseller the whole time. There were obviously no photographs. So there was also all these stories of like leaders of government or something wanted to play the guitar. They read the book. They went to his house in Cleveland. He moved to Cleveland. And he opened the door, and that's when they realized he was Black.
Wow.
And they were like, oh. And he was like, yeah, I'm your guitar teacher, come on in. And so that is, it's amazing history because we don't usually hear it, right? He passed away in the 1890s, and the book was still a bestseller 10 years after his passing, maybe more, into around 1910. And then that's around the time when Andres Segovia came from Spain to play here at Town Hall and brought European classical music here. And because a lot of people were learning from Segovia, your teacher helps you get jobs, right? And so that's when Segovia's name became a bigger name in our history than Justin Holland. But the interesting thing is, while Justin Holland was straight up all the way classical guitarist, a lot of people believe that because there were not copyright laws at the time, some of his arrangements of fingerstyle pieces, like this piece called Spanish Fandango, which was like an open G tuning, got copied illegally and stuck in, like Sears Roebuck tried to get everybody to buy a guitar, and they had these super cheap guitars that you could get through their catalog. And people think, this is the legend, the urban legend, that it was Justin Holland's music that got thrown in the case.
Wow.
And then so John Hurt got one, and then you end up with John Hurt picking, which later became known as Travis picking, Merle Travis from Nashville. So that history, even though he was a classical guitarist, it ended up influencing what we know as blues and folk and country. And, so it comes around. And the last thing I'll say, I know I'm going long, but think about this. So you're just gonna grab what you love, right? So I played you a little bit of Stairway to Heaven, right? Because I got that from my dad's record. So I got this job at Berklee in my first year. They said, you have to come to this dinner. We have a guest. We're gonna honor this guest, and he's a guitarist, and he's getting an honorary doctorate. We need you to go to dinner with him at the school. And I was like, okay, who is it? And they said, oh, it's Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. And they were like, well, you can bring a date if you want. And I was like, wait a minute, can I bring anybody? And they said, yeah. I said, can I bring my dad? Because my dad, no idea, right? Like if you have parents who don't know what you do musically. So I bring my dad, and we're talking to Jimmy Page, and he gets all excited, and he says to me, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I got to meet you. Listen, I quite admire what you do, and I have this question for you. And he does this with his arm, right? Guitarists know this. He goes, okay, listen. So when I'm practicing, I'm having this problem with my finger. This finger, I can't get it. When it goes, I can't, the sound, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So here's what you're doing. Here's what you do. And then I just started showing him, like, how to fix his A-finger technique. And he's like, oh. And so I'm giving him a lesson on our forearms, right? And my dad just goes, whoa. I was like, okay, yeah. So everybody is looking for what they need to practice, right? I think that's good to know. Right?
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So on that note, could maybe we hear a little of your performance and something related to the question, or just anything you want to play us?
Okay, I'll play a little something I'm working on. So since I went to Berklee, I decided to be a student as much as I could. And I was not a big improviser, only in special occasions before that, and often in the presence of these people, because you had to do different things, right? And I started in a duo with a colleague there who is into free improvisation. So like you mix keys and you do some things with multiple keys at one time. And I started writing music. We just started writing music for us. Those of you who are studying music history or in academia, you'll laugh because we didn't think we were good enough to write our own music, and we hired these composers through a grant, and then no one did the grant project properly. So in order to get the money, we had to write our own music. So that happens all the time, by the way. That's kind of often how you jump into something new. So anyway, this is a little bit of a piece that I'm writing, and you'll hear just like some different sounds, like from traditional classical music and also some from outside of that.
Was so good it provoked an allergy attack.
That always happens when the quiet person plays.
know.
Never fear. Right?
I was wondering why it had to be the nylon string that
Of course.
provoked it. It was so emotional. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So now I wanted to turn the question to school. Talk a little bit about excuse me, about school in general and how both school, traditional and non-traditional settings, you know, whether it's the jam session or whether it's college, what really, you know, what steps along the way shaped you as a player? And I want to start this with Kevin. If Kevin, if you might take this question on.
Okay. So I think I was in 11th grade, and one of my students, I was taking some kind of advanced placement class, and for his project, the student had his teacher come in and play a duet with him. And I heard classical guitar for the first time. I said, well, that's what I want to do. So I started taking that, and that's when I started getting into the guitar, look at guitar music. You see, it's an orchestra. It's like a mini orchestra. I stole that from Segovia, right? So, but before that, I was playing guitar. One of my friends said he told the teacher that he wanted me to audition for the jazz ensemble. I said, well, I don't play jazz. He said, well, I know, but audition for the jazz ensemble. So I went in, and they gave me some music. I couldn't read music, so but I could hear what they were doing. So they played bluegrass, and so I played the song, and the teacher said, "Oh, well, that was good. Okay, you're in the band." It's like, "Oh, now what? I don't read music." So I started taking lessons, and then at that point it became like, oh, okay, there's a school element to this thing, because I noticed that everybody else that was 16 had been playing in band since elementary school stuff, and they could all read. So we were playing in a jazz ensemble, and they could read. So the teacher gave me a bunch of Grant Green records, all those Jackson 5 covers, and I went home and I listened to that, and so that's how I carved my style from blues into more of a jazz, kind of a smooth jazz style, but I realized at that point that yes, I could play by ear, but to me, my mind could take me farther than my ear. I mean, like for musicians, our ear is our mind, right? Mm-hmm. But knowing, like someone gives you a bunch of scales and chords and things, and they say, okay, go home and play this, and go home and do this in all 12 keys and everything. And then when you go back and you play, you feel a little bit more comfortable, like you have more control over playing, now that you know the answers, So when it came time to go to college, I was playing in a band, and they said, please, don't go to college, let's go on the road with us. So I went on the road for a couple of years. And then someone heard me playing and said, hey, look, why don't do you want to teach? He said, because, I mean, you could make a good living teach, you can play your jazz, and then you wouldn't have to go on the road, and you can be like settled down. And I said, I kind of like that. So I started teaching, and then that's when I kind of got in that whole school environment thing. I was teaching, but I was still trying to be my own student, my own teacher, right? So trying to be teacher and student. So I met this one jazz. This lady said she was a head of the Capital District Jazz Society, and she says, I want you to meet this guy Clark Terry, famous jazz musician. So she introduced me to Clark Terry, and he said, so what are you doing? I said, I was like sticking my chest out. It's like, I'm practicing 8 hours a day. And he said, you have a teacher? I said, no, I'm doing it on my own. He said, listen, when you practice 8 hours a day without a teacher, you're gonna get really good, but you're gonna get good in left field.
All right.
So he gave me, I'm gonna give you the phone number of a guitar teacher. He's like the best guitar teacher ever. His name is Ted Dunbar, and he studied with him. So it's like full circle. And Ted taught him everything. It's like he had to write his own book and everything in college. So we had that pedigree with this guy who was a famous guitar teacher, who was an understudy of Wes Montgomery, actually. So the whole school thing, long story short, it helped someone who, like if you, I said before, you all have a good ear. The school is only gonna help that. It's not gonna hurt your playing.
Great, thank you. Tom, I want to pose this question to you, and I think part of it has to include how the two of you met, right? Because if you when I heard that you had, studied with Kevin, I wanted to know more.
Yeah. So let me answer that. I guess that first. That's how I met both Kevin and Kim. I was a student at a summer workshop at that time it was called the National Guitar Summer Workshop. And I was probably 14 or 15, somewhere around there. And I was really, I was into guitar. I was pretty sure that this was what I was going to do. And, I grew up in Binghamton, New York, and there was one very famous jazz musician named Slam Stewart who had retired there, and I got to hear him play a lot as a kid. But I wasn't able to see or hear, see live performances a lot. But at this, I saw this advertisement for this guitar workshop, and the last week of the workshop, this guitarist who I knew from Guitar Player magazine and eventually got one of his records was going to be the guest artist, and that was Larry Coryell. And I thought, I've got to go and check this out. And so I went, and it changed my life. And I have to say, still, at the age of there's really not a day
27.
that goes by that I don't think about something related to that place. I've spent, I was basically there from 1984 until 2012. Yeah. First as a student, then as that's how I learned to teach too, because they had this program that taught you how to taught young, it's almost like a junior camp counselor sort of situation. And that's kind of how I learned. I student taught there, and then I met Kevin my second year, I think, is when you started there. I had Barry Kermich the first year, and I think you were my teacher the second year. And Kevin, then and now represents everything I want to be as a guitar player, all that deep-rooted blues, those clear ideas, all that kind of language is, I remember the first time I heard him play, I was like, I'm going to study with that guy? Wow. So, yeah, and he mentioned Ted Dunbar. So as I got closer to college age and trying to figure out what to do, Kevin went to William Patterson, and at the time, I think you were there? Yeah, I think you were still there. Because Chris Amelar, right? You were there? Right. So that was this one place that you could go to, and I was really thinking about it. The guitar teacher there was Harry Leahy, and I was really thinking about going there. But then I heard about Ted Dunbar, and I think I heard it from you maybe at one point, and then I started doing some research, and I discovered all these guitar players that I really liked, like Kevin, Ed Cherry, Bobby Broom, all these great guitar players had all studied with Ted.
Wow.
And so I figured I gotta go to the Ted Dunbar School of Guitar here.
So on that note, thinking about that time that you spent, on that note, maybe we could get you to play something.
Sure. So kind of along those lines, so one of the things Ted always had, and especially now that I teach in a college, setting, now I understand why he had it this way. But you would have every semester 45 to 50 bebop tunes that you would have to learn, and you'd have to be able to play for your final exam. And all the guitar players would be sweating in the practice rooms. So this is not really a bebop tune, but this was one of the tunes on one of the semesters of that list. And it's just a tune that I have come back to a lot over the past couple of years, and especially in light of what happened yesterday in Texas. This is a great Horace Silver tune called Peace.
Woo. So now we know what the red button does. That was very cool. Thank you.
One thing when I was getting ready to come here, I was thinking, Kim's going to be playing nylon string guitar. And Kevin, I wasn't sure if you were going to bring your hollow body or your semi-hollow body. I thought, well, if this is art of guitar, I got to bring like my telly and pedals. Because
Nice.
what's art of guitar without
Right, you got to have some.
pedals?
So there was the pedals are being displayed, right?
Pedals are on full display.
The loop station, you know, that it's a very powerful tool, right? Because it created a rhythm, it seamlessly created a rhythm track and then started to solo, and all of a sudden there was two Dempseys, right? There was two Dempsey, one Dempsey turned into two. Thank you very much for that. That was awesome. So in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we have time. We've got student performance and we've got group performance and Q&A. But I did want to make sure that we did ask Kim this question, which is a question about how do you practice? I mean, how is practice? How do you approach practice? How do you practice, you know, technique, and what you know, what's your approach? I mean, because for a musician, you know, practice is kind of the key to
Right.
efficient practice and smart practice, not just practice.
Yeah, I think, you know, to tie in the school question a little bit, it changes over time, right? So the way I practiced in undergrad is different than when I was in my master's, when I was in my doctorate, and then after and in between, right? And I think, so you're going to have the demands of your learning environment, right? And then you're also going to have the people you're playing with. And so there's all your friends and what they're doing can play a big part in your practicing. So there's like solo practice, and then there's playing with other people, and that can really help out. So I think when you're in school, the more you can tie that aspect in, the better. In undergrad, for example, I always had a practice partner. And so we would go into the practice room and we'd say, okay, we're going to be in there for 45 minutes, and this is what I'm going to get done, and this is what you're going to get done. And then we'd meet in the hallway, and, you know, we'd either play for each other in the practice rooms, but we kind of go through the list, like, did you actually get done what you're going to get done? So you don't just kind of like do whatever, you know what I mean, and feel like you're practicing. I think that's really helpful. I think making sure that you understand that your sound and what you're going for musically is not separate from your technique. That's the other thing. So I started really thinking about this specifically in like parameters of sound, like how do you make dynamics on your instrument? So when if you're playing like vocabulary, if you're playing scales, if you're playing chords, you know, there's a physical reality on the guitar. Everybody gets it wrong. They all think, oh, you hit it harder to make it louder. But you don't. You put more weight on the string to make something louder. If you want something to sound more full and big, you push through the string slower as opposed to like attacking it, you know, like that's going to give you a pointy sound rather than a, right? And the shape of that sound, if you're a recording person, that's a envelope, you know, what's the shape of your tone? And so you get a sense of like, okay, what do you want your normal sound to be? Do you want it to be connected? Do you want it to be full? What does that mean for your technique on your instrument and with your hands? So that you don't go into this thing where it's like, okay, I'm gonna learn these scales and play them, and then I'm gonna put in the dynamics and the colors and the envelope, and, you know, that doesn't work because everything you do has a technical component in it, right? And so one thing you can do is, you know, you got to think about like, what do you want? What are your fundamentals? Like every teacher is going to require fundamentals. At Berklee, we do like, you have to every semester do certain scales and modes, certain triads, certain dyads, like intervals and things like that. How can you practice that really musically? And that gives you your foundation. So you don't just cram for the test. You know, a lot of people will say like, oh yeah, I didn't work on my proficiency materials. I just worked on my repertoire. But what makes up your repertoire are the materials. So I would say like, trust your teachers when they tell you like, this is the vocabulary you need, because they already know that. They wrote that vocabulary for you because they went out and played gigs and concerts and things like that. And they know that that's coming, even if it's not there. So you do that, but then everything you do, you have to think about parameters, so dynamics, how do you make them? do you have at least 3 levels of dynamic that you could nail without thinking about it? You know exactly how much weight to put so that you could play soft, medium, loud. Start there. One thing, Kevin and I shared the same classical teacher at one point, and he used to say nobody ever plays loud enough because you always start at the bottom. You always start at the bottom of the thing. You're like, okay, 2 to 5 to 10. So your 10 is not 10, it's like 8. So like start at the top, play as loud as you can, and then back it off, you know, loud as you can play musically, and then come down, right? And then think about color. Like if you want to be bright, how do you do that? If you want to be warm, how do you do that? How do you get your tone to be different colors? How do you get your sound to be a different shape? Pointy, legato, you know. What registers do you use? Do you always play fast stuff in a high register? Do you always think of like low things as earthy and whole notes? Do you ever play whole notes? Duration. Do you ever play different durations? Do you always play the same durations? If you're an improviser, like, do you only play 8th notes and 16th notes? Do you ever play like, I don't know, a whole note displaced by a 16th note? Like, what do you kind of miss? You know, velocity, how do you think of it? Do you think of it as a dynamic, or is it like speed and fear in your mind? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, so that, like, how do you think of those things? How do you think of density? Are you always playing? Do you ever take a break? You know, do you play conversationally? Like, so you just make a list of those 7 things, and then you think, like, how do I use them as you're learning your vocabulary, your repertoire, and then you just take a deep breath and realize, like, nobody does everything every day, right? And you just kind of look at where you are, and I'm not going to get into this because we don't have a ton of time, but I just wanted you to see this is what my current notebook looks like, and you just write stuff down. Like, you're improvising, you come up with something cool, like, just write it down. Write down notes for yourself. You know, keep a little journal, even on a piece of paper, like, I did these scales today, I did this today, so that you rotate it. Like, you know, I'm a big believer in writing things down.
Well, it's, I mean, there's also a thing too. If you make a list, then you feel like you've accomplished something, and then you feel like you can accomplish something more, right? And
Well,
that's-
yeah. And if you have a buddy, like, I had given this, we might get to it, we might not, depends on the flow, but my friend and I, who we practice together every Thursday, we play for 4 hours a day every Thursday. We've done it for 8 years now. I can't believe that's true. Since I got to Berklee, we started making these lists of stuff we were working on, and we turned it into like an avant-garde graphic score. So it's like, I'm working on ascending scales, you're working on descending scales, I'm working on these intervals, and you know, and then we just called the piece circles, and we sit and we practice our stuff back and forth to each other.
Oh, I think we need to get to
You know,
circles. We need to find out about
That
circles.
would be
for
cool.
sure.
And like it started this circles movement with the students, like,
Right.
you know, and it could sound like cacophony, it could sound gorgeous, you never know, you don't know. But it gets you to practice your stuff, and it somehow, if you say it's music, because it is, right? You will respect it more than if you think it's like
Scales.
calisthenics.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but scales are music, right? Like, everybody knows that. But then when you go to practice your scales, like, I'm practicing, you're putting on the golf channel. You know what I mean? You're playing the scales. But if you said, like, I am performing this piece called Circles that has ascending scales in it, guess what? It's going to sound more like music. You're going to use more of your parameters. You're going to think more like a musician. The other thing that works great is if you put on a tape recorder, you put on your phone or your DAW or whatever, you suddenly will feel like nobody wants to make a bad recording even if no one else is going to hear it. You know, so those are good tools just to get yourself in this mindset. It's okay to really embrace the fact that music is sacred, whatever that means to you. You know, so when you pick up the instrument, if you come to it with that kind of care, you will sound better. If you do something with intention, it will sound right. If you do something tentatively or like you don't care about it, it will sound wrong every time, even if it's right. So like the way you play something sometimes is more important than what you play. And that's being said by a classical guitarist, right? So like it gives you a little power in the moment when you're afraid, because that's normal. You know, when you just think, I'm just going to take care of this note, right?
That recording piece that you were talking about, I think is so important. I always say, like, if you want to grow like at the quickest rate possible, record yourself.
Oh my God.
Because ultimately, we all know what good music and not so good music sounds like. And so if we hear it back, it's like, oh, I did that. I didn't realize I did that. Let me fix that.
Right.
It's like the best the best thing to do.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I think in the interest of time, we should see if we could bring our student performer. So Tom, probably the easy thing to do would be if Kevin moves down, then he could sit there. And then I don't know if we want to, what amp is going to use the same amp? Yeah. And then so we can, so that way we're all here.
Oh, wow.
So I'm
Yeah.
going to bring up my student Virtus.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So as he's getting set up, Virtue started studying with me 2 semesters ago. First semester was all done online. And, you know, I think that's all I have to say, right? So he, you know, I mean, he's always been, you know, someone who's really tried to connect with the lesson, but I really feel like this semester we've made a lot of progress. He's made a lot of progress with the instrument now that we've been together. So we're gonna. He's starting to learn how to improvise, and go ahead and plug in. So we're taking an adaptation of a Sonny Rollins tune called "Sunny Moon for Two." Change the key on it a little bit, and he's going to play that and improvise on it, and we're going to, you know, offer some feedback. So if you've never been in something like this is quasi masterclass setting, kinder, gentler masterclass setting. So
Can I say something before we go? Is it possible maybe Kevin and I could sit over there so
Yeah.
we can see? And then maybe, I feel bad for V because we're staring at him from on the stage.
yeah, that's great. You got fine?
So how about a round of applause? Let's look at this performance of the week.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I mean, I'd be curious to get. I can offer some stuff. He hears my feedback all the time, but I'll give him some feedback too. But it was really great, man. You know.
No, I like your timing because you played in time. It's music. It's music. So now, nothing can go wrong. You're in time. The other thing is, what was interesting is your concentration. Nothing threw you off. Like if you hit a wrong string or something, your time. You made it back. It's a take. That's a take. You know. So. I like the fact that you were like, okay, so you know that you were playing this scale. It's like your pentatonic minor scale, and you stuck to that scale in your performance. Mm-hmm. Like, so you know that the scale is like the map, the pattern, what am I trying to? It's like the trail, the trail. Blake that's been blazed, like, okay, you can use this scale for the information for the harmonic and melodic information that you're going to use in your solo. And you did that, and then so you deviated from the rhythm of the melody, and you made up your own rhythms during your solo. It's good. I like that. I like that you did that. Thank you.
Okay. Hi. You know, one thing that I noticed, so you were able to smile as you played, which was great. You held your breath a lot. Do you know that you hold your breath?
I do that in technique to like focus a lot more.
Yeah, okay, so here's what I think, because I agree with everything Kevin said. I think it was really strong, really clear. Love your tone. And I think, like, you know, I was thinking of our same teacher now. His name is Phil DeFermery. He studied with Segovia. So that's like, you know, that's a long lineage, right? And he used to say all the time, one thing that you did great was luck favors the prepared, right? So you were nervous when you came in, but you were prepared, so you sounded great, right? And the other thing is, like, a whole lot better is just a little bit farther away. That's what he said. So I have this theory that if you breathe, like if you were to play a little bit again, and if you did two things, if you breathe, and then if you, like, you have that part nailed, and you're comfortable as you're improvising, you know the scale, you know where you are. What do you think? I mean, this is like a rhetorical question, but it's something to think about practically. Like, if you were going to take those phrases and make them sound a little bit different, if you just changed up a little bit different in the inflection, like you're having a conversation, then that would bring it to life in a certain way. Like, if you could kind of just own it, like if you owned that riff and you just played it, like, could you just play the riff just solo, just play it? Yeah, like, now think of it like in your mind, even just that part that repeats all the time, that ba-da-da-dum, you know, that part that we get in our head all the time, and just play it like it's a song, like it's you can make up lyrics in your head, you could just play it, but like play it like I don't know it, and it's really important that I know it. You know what I mean? Play it like it's a sentence and you're following it from the first note to the last note. Okay, now do this. Before you do it again, take 3 giant deep breaths. Like, really, everybody's gonna breathe with you so you don't feel weird breathing in front of us. So like but like through your mouth, through your nose and out your mouth, and then after total air fills up, then you're gonna just play it, like just go. Ready? Go, go, go. mom so that you don't feel like out by yourself in space. So can you play behind him? Like, yeah. So do the same thing. Just listen for a while, take giant deep breaths, and just give it to us like it's the most important thing we've ever heard in our lives. Play each note a little different, some of them harder, some of them softer, bend something. Just make it your thing. It's your thing. Thing. That was great. Now, right before you go to the second string, oh, I like the accompaniment when I teach. I should always have accompaniment. The first time you go to the second string, that's when you hold your breath. And did everybody hear that when he plays the note on the second string, the E, it's softer? It's because you're holding your breath. So you're going to play the first part of the phrase. You're going to take a breath in and let it out, and then play that E, and it'll be stronger. I promise. Okay, breathe though. Let it out. So I would just say produce yourself. That's all I was doing. I was like, being a producer is like the best job in the world. I recommend it. I got to do it for 3 years. You get to say, I'd like to hear a little more of this, and then the person does it. But that's it. Just say what you want more of. Oh, I want more bends. You started to do things where you would play softer on purpose. That's so cool. Like, go with that. Play even softer than, you know what I mean? Like, make that more extreme. You're playing like a little grittier sometimes, make it more extreme. You want to take space in between phrases, take more. Like, make us wait for you. Be like B.B. King and wait, like make us wait. Be like Freddie King and make us wait 2 minutes. You know what I mean? But I think you sound great.
Thank you. Yeah. One other thing, so this time when you were playing, you didn't anchor. Do you have two approaches that, like, sometimes you anchor your right hand, sometimes you don't?
I kind of feel like that's just like subconscious doing it.
No, you should have two approaches. You can do both. Mm-hmm. But you want to know you're doing both, so you have control over it.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say briefly, what everyone doesn't see is the amount of improvement that you've had, playing on this. I mean, it's really incredible. And, one of the things that I always compliment you about in the lesson is that anytime I give you something, you soak it up. And and so you obviously have a musical ear. You obviously have a musical mind and a musical soul. So it's just a matter of, getting comfortable with, acknowledging that's there, and trusting that it's there, and letting it, start to come out. Yes, there's plenty more that lie ahead, but you've got all of the foundational stuff, and and like Kevin was saying, your time is solid, and really, I mean, ultimately, we all got into music not because of the sound of, the Phrygian mode. We got into music because it made us dance. It made us feel something, and that's intrinsically connected to rhythm and pulse. So you've got that. Those kinds of things are harder things to teach. So yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Another teacher that Tom and I shared is a guy named Rodney Jones.
Yeah.
I think we studied with him at Manhattan School of Music, and when I was at City College. He said to me that, if you could get a little bit better, like just a little, I think he said 5% every week or something. But every time I hear you, you're like 10% better. Like he said, just a little bit better each week. You'll be surprised after 3 months. So don't think that just don't try and do it all. Right? So yeah, that's.
It is a cumulative and long-term process, right? And the only thing I'd add on to that is, was it a little nervous to get in front of people?
Yeah.
So what I would suggest is take every opportunity you can to do that, because the more that you do it, the more that you'll not only learn to overcome the nervousness at seeing the crowd, but start to incorporate them into what you're doing, right? So it becomes an interrelationship with the audience, what you're doing. Okay?
Did you say that was the first time you performed in front of?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So,
So solid.
well, thank you very much. We appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. So I think that in the interest of what, you had brought something up. Oh, do we have another?
No, I just want to. I had Jonathan, but I haven't seen him, so I don't know if he made it.
Okay.
Today, so.
Well, if Jonathan isn't here, then I think we've been told about circles, and we want to hear about these circles. I heard about this piece called Circles that actually I think might be a nice way to think about art of the guitar, right? Because we're thinking about exploring this idea. So if I could call you guys back to the stand. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Very sure.
Kevin, you need your map.
All right. Okay.
Another fine mess you're going to get us into.
I know. Sorry about that, Tom. Well, I mean, to be fair, you got me into a mess for like 20 years. You got me hired at this crazy guitar.
Well, I think
camp.
that putting these guys out of their comfort zone is kind of a good thing after we
Well,
have a masterclass with the students.
Yeah, right? So, yeah, I'm usually the one out. So, okay, so the reason this is called Circles is because there's circles on the. We're not very creative, my duo partner and I, in that way. Like, we called one of them gray because it got gray when you when you photocopy something over and over again, it turns gray. That's why we call it gray, like that kind of thing. So circles was a way, it's kind of a practice technique. So in all the circles are things we were working on for our music. So in these particular circles that my friend and I wrote, one of them says like wide interval counterpoint. The other one says harp scales, which use the open strings, right? One is high dyads and some kind of combination like with a rhythm. Some is like play left hand alone on the bass strings. But it could be anything you're working on. It could be like, I love these triads that aren't tertiary. it could be like beautiful chords like that. It could be anything you're working on. It could be like if you're a jazz musician, it could be certain modes or certain scales that you're working on or certain harmonies. It doesn't have to be out. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be in a key either, right? And then the one thing that's in the middle is one person is going to try to imitate a cello as much as possible and play this melody and play a melody. And then that part is the part that moves. So like if I started playing the melody and you guys played whatever you want your circles to be, just something, then at a certain point, I might stop playing the melody. One of you will play a melody. And then I'll play what I want my circles to be. The reason that it's fun to do is because you can kind of take technical things and make them beautiful, and then you never know what the sounds are going to be because it's free, right? It's part of this tradition where you're not in a key. So that's the concept of circles. Does that make sense?
I'm very scared.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We haven't lost
we're in new
anybody yet.
territory here.
I haven't lost anybody yet. So I'm going to start with a melody, and you guys you can pick what you want to play in your circles. You can pick. You don't have to pick from my list. You can do your own. You can just, it doesn't have to be at any time. You can just start playing, but play like a thing. So like say you're playing chords, just play chords. You could play like long tone, beautiful chords, whatever, right? And then my part's gonna be a melody, then Tom's part might be something else. Might be arpeggios or something. And then we'll just start to pass it around. Cool.
And we start in a tonality and then leave.
Let's just go free.
Okay, go for
Let's
it.
just go free. It's easier.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I came all this way. Yeah, we'll be to be free. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Tom. Okay, here we go.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was music without a net, right? I mean, you just, what are we going to play? Well, we're going to play, and then that's what we're going to play.
The funny thing is, the more you do that kind of stuff, the ending just decides it's going to be there. And then you start to see that the only thing really that all music has in common is that it always ends. And you have to look for the ending.
It's
you
like
know?
is there an eventual ending there, and you're just finding it, right?
You're just finding it. It's like, hey, it's over now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful to know. Yeah.
All right. So I want to make sure that we make use of our time here, and I want to make sure that we have time for some roundtable and also some Q&A. As far as roundtable, I could get you guys talking. I want to make sure that we're expedient with time, though, because we want to make sure that we fit in some time for students too. But here you are, and since you happen to be from a senior music college,
Yeah.
we wanted to talk a little bit about when students that are music performance students that we have, and they're looking into transferring, they're thinking about senior colleges. What are the expectations from a senior college as far as what students are leaving a junior college, say LaGuardia?
Right. Okay, so I think probably everybody's thinking about this, right? And so I can say, on behalf of Berklee, there are a couple things that might be helpful. And I think just in general, we have two things that are out right now. It's a pandemic project. One is a podcast called Berklee Guitar Department Coffee Talk. And it's a podcast I host with faculty. And so you get a good sense of who the teachers are, what they expect, what they're looking for. I think there's 50 episodes. So you could kind of pick the teachers that you like or that you think might be up your alley. You can listen to what they're saying. The other thing we did as part of that series that's also on our YouTube page is with admissions. It's like a stylistic diversity webinar series. And there's a component in that about the audition. So you can get my perspective now, but then you can get different teachers' perspectives but if you want to watch that. The one thing that's true about Berklee is maybe a little bit different than some schools because stylistically we care about who you are. And so what's interesting is I think when you're trying to audition for college, whether you're in high school or you're coming from junior college, you can be insecure about where your level is. Everybody is always insecure about that. That never goes away. But really the school cares about what do you want to study? Who are you? Or is the music that you're playing when you go to audition reflect who you are as a musician? As opposed to trying to impress people, you just want to play authentically to you and to the styles that you're playing. So really think about that when you choose the repertoire that you're going to use on any instrument. That's really what they're looking for. The Berklee audition is a little bit different in the sense that it's long, it's 20 minutes. You play your piece. That's what you do first. And you're playing for musicians who might not be of your instrument. So they really just care if you're making music. And if your hands or your technique, if it comes from your voice or from your embouchure, if it looks fluid, if it's serving the music that you're playing. If their hearing tension get in the way, they'll put that down so that if they feel like you're ready to come, you might work on that. But that's what you want to just remember. It's a musical performance, right? It has some musical integrity to it. Then they're going to ask you things like every school has their value system. So we want you to read in the audition a chart that has chords on it and that has notation because we offer every style and it's just going to help you work. It's going to help you get gigs on campus and off campus if you can read. So just knowing that, you want to get your reading together so that you could get through that part. They're going to ask you some questions like, here's a major scale. Now I'm going to play back a few notes. And it's just ear training games and stuff. You're honestly not supposed to get the right answer all the time. They just want to see how you work. And it's obviously a pressure situation. They just want to see if you'll give something a try. right? And so they're just going to have you do that. And then there are some improvisation guidelines, but it's by style, right? So like not everybody's going to play a blues in F, but they're going to want you to do that. So I think in general, the more prepared you can be for the audition you're walking into, because you're showing the foundation that you've created, and each school might have a different idea of what they want. Like Berklee wants you to have a foundation in music so that you can have a multi-stylistic approach that allows you to work in the contemporary music industry, even if it's classical music, right? A classical school that's straight up classical is going to have a different value system. So they're going to want heavy on the repertoire. And then if it's scales, that might be certain scales, right, that show a part of your tone or your technique. So I think it's important also to pick the school that fits you to audition for, right? And then the other thing I would say is like, look at the teachers and look them up. You might be surprised at how communicative people will be if you get them on the right day. So you might say like, oh, I emailed this guy and he never wrote me back. But that person might have gotten 100 emails that day, or they might have been on tour, or you know what I mean? Or maybe it was final exams. I would keep writing to that person, or write to the chairs of the department, or, and just ask some questions if you can. Just kind of listen to people. You're in New York, go to people's gigs. Like go to someone's gig and just be like, I want to study with you, because there's a financial component to all this too, right? And so you're going to go and do the best you can. And then you also never know about that, because money is funny at schools. It's not just like, oh, they didn't give me any money this time, so there's no way I can go there. You don't know that maybe next year they got a donation, or there was a fund that wasn't there the time before. Well, it was COVID, so we had promised all our money, so we didn't have any money this time, but then all of a sudden we have more money. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't discount it, just try it. Because also people teach in multiple places, right? So you might play for someone and they'd be like, oh my God, the guy is amazing, or that woman is unbelievable. And it didn't work out for you to go to that school, but then you don't know where that leads. So does that answer the question? Okay.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think one thing to take away is to hustle a little bit, to work with it, to try and work with to get what you want and try and reach for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important that's an important thought, to just don't think the door is either going to open or it's not going to open. Sometimes it's going to open if you keep tapping it, right? I mean, if you...
Yeah, because people aren't, I've done hundreds of auditions now for Berklee. Like I did these trips, like they send us all over the world so people don't have to fly to Berklee. Like you can audition in New York, you can fly, because you're in Italy. And like we were in Asia. Did you really? We did this thing at this time in Asia where it was like, I think we saw like 300 people or something. And the attitude of it is like, we get to work with really good musicians on that day, right? Who are all the people who are auditioning. And they're just looking for like a good fit for everybody in every way that's possible. And they're not looking really, it's like, it's more of a match with auditions and less of a level thing. So you don't know. On the day that I found out I got into Yale School of Music, on the same day I found out I did not get into Florida State University. It's like, do you know what I'm saying? Like it was really a blessing, because it was like Yale was like the best fit for me for that program. And
Right.
for a really good friend of mine, it was the opposite.
Right.
And Florida was better for him. So you have to like do it going in, like feeling like, okay, I'm looking for the best spot for me. You're kind of auditioning the school as you are auditioning for the school.
Right. Because, it's about what your development, you're going to that school for your development, not it's what you can do, what the school can do for you in a sense, right? And that's important.
Because then you're part of that community forever. Like one of the things that happens that always blew me away was like, so now I'm the chair of the guitar department. So I run the guitar department. So it's 1,000 students in the guitar department. Well, about probably 900 now. And it fluctuates. And people come in on the first day of school, we meet everybody. So you do a placement audition again when you arrive in your first semester. You play your audition piece, and just because of course you've gotten better and they want to make sure you're in the right ensemble and everything. And then you come and you sit with me or in the assistant chair, who's a New Yorker, Cheryl Bailey, great guitar player, and we just kind of talk to you and put you with a teacher. And every time someone says to me something like, wow, you have this really great school here. And I was like, no, we have this really great school here. Like, once you go to a place, it belongs to you.
Right.
The school belongs to you. I think in high school, you kind of come up in this adversarial thing with school. You know what I mean? Like, I had a teacher in undergrad, and he used to say to us all the time, he said, do you people believe that teaching is an adversarial profession? and I always felt terrified when he asked me that, because I was like, I don't know, do you? Because I think you kind of do. But it belongs to you. It's your home. It's your place. It will be your place forever. You know what I mean? Because it will always be your community of people that you meet, that you kind of grow up with in music. And you'll have other communities too, right? From work and friends and stuff. But your school is a main one. And so it's yours. And I think when you go into it, it's like what we were just talking about with your playing. It's like if you go into it with a sense of ownership, you go into it differently. And I know it sounds really new agey, but it's true. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of own your education. It's for you, and you're there to learn, but you're also there to claim it for yourself.
Right. And that's a really hard thing. I mean,
Yeah.
if you could teach that to my 8-year-old son, I'd appreciate that. But,
I'm trying to teach it myself, like, yeah, it's hard.
But
It's hard.
in the interest of time, I wonder if we could open up to see if anybody has any questions for our panelists. We could certainly listen to all of you. I could ask you questions forever, but I'd love to open it up for see if students have some questions. Ebony?
So my question is for Kim. I wanted to know, like, if you faced any struggles, like being a woman and like in a male-dominated field, I guess. Like what that was like for you, being a girl power.
Girl power.
Yeah.
Yes. And yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. We could talk for a long time about that. In a short, I will say, yeah, absolutely. I think it's good to know these things are real. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not crazy. I have one friend that also worked with us at the workshop, Karen Hogue, and we still, to this day, we text each other this one line: you're not crazy and you're not a jerk, right? Like, when you have your instincts that something isn't quite right, then you're right? But then you're and you're going to think about a couple things. You're going to think about, am I uncomfortable or am I unsafe? And this goes for anybody who's different in any environment, right? If you're uncomfortable and you care about the thing you're doing and you love it, you're going to find a way to do it. And really be grateful for the good people, for the people who are supporting you and who are respectful of you. And then just kind of keeping an eye on the people who are not, until you don't need to work with them anymore. We had, in terms of like the second part, I will say, I won't get too into it, but I'll say, like, when I was young, when I was your age, we had a list. There was a list, an actual list that the few women who were classical guitarists who were our age, we would say, like, who's safe to study with? Like, who's safe to be alone in a room with for teachers? And we just kind of, people like told me, they're like, hey, listen, when you audition, you're going to need to know you probably don't want to go to that school. And I was like, what? And they're like, listen, just trust me about that. Or there are the guys actually were great that I went to school because I was often the only young woman. And then we would have guests and they was like, when that guy comes, I'm going with you to your lesson. I'm just going to go with you.
Right.
I actually brought a guy. I wanted to take some lessons in New York from someone, and I brought a guy with me. I brought a friend with me, and he just came and sat and hung out in my lessons.
Was he going like this the whole time, or just?
No, he just sat there, and it was brutal. Like the person I was studying with kept trying to send him out on errands and stuff, and we were like, "We'll just go together," I was like, "Oh my God," it was horrible. It's like, and then like 10 years later, that I swear that person, who will remain nameless, he said to me, I just want to say you were so classy because I was hitting on you for like 10 years when you were a student and you were always really cool with me. I was like, what? Okay, I was hoping that wasn't actually happening, but it was happening. And so, just trust your instincts, use your friends, I had these one time I was in a master class and I was playing, and the guys will do this thing sometimes with classical guitar where they'll come around the back of you and they'll put their hands on your guitar so you can see. And he was really, really close to me. And I can't do this with microphones. So what I did was I just slipped out from underneath and I turned around and sat on the floor. And so he was standing up, like holding my guitar like this. And I said, I'm sorry, I can just see you so much better. Like, it was like in front of 200 people, and everybody laughed, and he just kind of, kept going. That stuff happens less, but it still happens, right? And now, like, I'm not that old. I'm in my 40s now. And so this was happening when I was in my 20s. And now, fast forward, like, I am the chair of the largest guitar department in the world, and Cheryl Bailey is the assistant chair. Like, this is the first time that a huge program like that is run by 2 women, right? So things are changing. And, the dean who hired me, he said, about a week or 2 in to my job there, he said, I just want you to know that people are coming up and they're saying to me, oh, it's so great that you hired a woman. And he said, and I just want you to know that I tell them I didn't hire a woman. I hired the best guitarist that I could find. And I was like, there you go. And that's what happened with Cheryl. Thank you. That's what happened with Cheryl. Like, and people said to me, you don't want to hire Cheryl because 2 women, it's really hard. The team, like, what would you do? Because it's like 2 women. And I was like, well, it was 2 guys for like 45 years. Like, I think we can figure it out. Like, I'm pretty sure we're cool, and it's awesome, right? So I think that's just to say that things are shifting. But yeah, you have to be great at what you do all the time. Anytime you're different, you have to be that much better. And I don't think that's exclusive to women. I think it's anyone who is different. In any way. I think you have to be great. I think you have to be aware. And, that kind of stuff is really important. But that's a great question. Thanks for asking the question.
Cheryl Bailey is a beast.
Oh, my God.
She's a gunslinger.
Yeah, she's a beast. She will smoke you. She will melt your face. Yeah.
Rosa, do I see your hand raised? Did you raise your hand?
When you were playing before, about saying your ear is the basic thing to music, I could actually relate to that because I always say my ears are my eyes because that's true, because I don't have my eyesight, so I could relate to that. I realized when I listen to music, every time you listen to music, you learn about the genre or the musician or how he writes the song, or it's not, for me, inclusivity is important because I'm blind, but I'm also a female that wants to get into the industry. And I realized that there's no female visually impaired woman in the industry. So I might be the first one, or might be, I don't know. It was just like, I felt like the eyes, the ears are a foundation for you to use instead of your eyes. I mean, most artists say sight reading is important, but with my condition, I usually have trouble doing that, but getting a little familiar on how to read certain things is kind of a challenge, but to break out of that challenge, you need to learn, you need to advocate for yourself.
That's right. I think that's right. I'm going to turn the ear part over to you guys, but there is a student who just graduated Berklee. She's a really great vocalist, and she's visually impaired, and she's working with the Grammy Foundation to help to facilitate a better path in the industry. So I'm going to send her name to you, Tom, and then you can share it. But I think you brought up one great point that is also important to your question, is that you just lead with your music. You're great. You're going to do great things. You're willing to learn and build on it. And that's what wins the day. Do you know what I mean? No matter what bias comes in the front door with you, if you tear it up, and you're solid and you have a good sense of what you can demonstrate at this moment and that's what you play, it's going to be fine. In fact, we just had a student who I sent her on this gig, got totally vibed. There was this older professor there, totally vibed her in front of 35 people, and she shredded him. She just, in a very nice way, was like, oh, this is how you do it, and just melted his face. You know what I mean? People filmed it. It was so deep. He kept trying to throw her off. He's like, well, do you know how to do this? I bet you don't know how to do this. And she was like, oh, you mean this? And she just like, it was hilarious. I watched the video and I was like, well, he won't do that again. You know what I mean? And then we went right to the Title IX office and reported him. We were like, here's the tape. Please don't hire this person anymore for this class, right? So that's the other thing that's changing. But what happened to the student was she didn't have to make a complaint. I did. I was like, I'm making the complaint. You won the day and you just keep rolling. You know what I'm saying? So you find your strength. And with what you're talking about, it's the same thing. Like, you have a different strength in your ear. That's great. You know what I mean? Like, you can use that. That could be your ears can be your eyes, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I was going to kind of, touch on that and what Kim was saying about sometimes, we all have different kinds of strengths and weaknesses and some more than others, but sometimes you have to take what is your strength and make it that much stronger to accommodate for a weakness that maybe you don't have any control over. Like so many musicians that I know who are visually impaired have some of the most amazing ears and are just, they're, what you might not be, what one musician who might not be able to sight read something, that same musician, if you sang it to them, will play it right back to you. So, but it's, it's like, okay, there's certain things that we don't have any control over right now. And we take what we have and we develop that to the highest level possible.
All right. Do we have one more, Oscar? You looked like you had a moment of holding there. So, what? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Not completely worded, but throughout your years of working with other musicians, I can imagine you guys have had ego clashes, right? And my question to you guys, how is it that, like, how do you maneuver around other people's egos and your own to pretty much grow as a musician and, like, not let, them stomp your passions or,
Bare knuckle boxing, right? Isn't it that? No.
I'll tell you how I dealt with it. I did a recording session one time, and it was 2 guitar players on the session. And, when you're playing behind a singer, you're supposed to, like, do your fills when they're not singing, right? Because you don't want to step on their toes. But the other guitar player, every time there was an opening, the other guitar player, he filled it in. So at the end of the session, the leader called me and said, good, you guys sounded great. He says, but one other thing, he says, but why didn't you fill in more? And I said, because basically the other guy guerrillaed the space, and if I had played while he was trying to play, then it wouldn't be music. It wouldn't have been musical. So, and he said, you're right. I appreciate that. So I deferred at that point. I wasn't going to get into, because it wasn't going to be musical. If I was going to do something egotistical, if I was going to go, I'm going to do it too, it wouldn't have been musical. So I went for the, like, okay, we don't both have to do
So
that.
taking the high road is one.
That's one way I did it.
Tom?
I guess I've been in those situations before, but to me, like, everything is about, like, the sort of techniques that you have when you get ready to play live music, right? Whether you are loud or soft at a certain point, whether you play or not play at a certain point. All those kinds of decisions that you make as a musician kind of factor into those interpersonal sorts of things that you have when somebody, might have a larger ego. Sometimes you just have to let that ego have its way and just, kind of fall into the background. I think when I was younger, sometimes it bothered me more, but the older I get, the more grateful, and like every single day, the more grateful I am just to be able to wake up every day and have a life in music.
Mm.
And so I kind of approach everything from that standpoint. Like, even if there's an ego, even if there's, somebody in the band is being a real drag, it's like, I get to do this. So, like, it doesn't really, I'm aware of it, but I wouldn't say that it negatively impacts me. It was different when I was younger, but I would say in the last however many years, that's kind of how I am with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
great.
really interesting. I like that, what you said. It reminds me of, I got some advice one time, like, that what you do only really has to be about who you are. And you can be, sometimes you have to be because you have to work, right? Sometimes you're in a situation with negative people, right? I love what you both said, because sometimes you can't just like quit the band or quit the school because you need to go to school or you need the gig, right? So then you can think about like, well, as long as it's not an unsafe situation, you can think like, what can I get out of this that could be great for me? Like, what do I want to take from this when I walk away from it? Because you will, right? If it's not the right spot, you might be in it for a while to make money, to get some experience, and then you're going to walk away. What do you want to take with you? You want to take positive things. So what can you do in this situation? Like, how might you learn to listen? How might you learn when you get to play what you're going to play, how to make it count? And then I think the more you can center in yourself and find people that you trust, because like when you're in a school situation too, sometimes you'll have jerks have all kinds of jobs, right? Like I had an advisor who was a jerk one time, and he said to me, I was doing all this different teaching, and I was playing new music, and I was doing all these different things, and I wasn't like a traditional straight up classical guitar player anymore. And he said, one day he just said to me, I feel bad for you because you'll never work in academia. You'll never get a job in academia. Because jobs in academia are given out by guys like me. Guys like me don't care about the stuff that you care about. And I just said, I really appreciate that you're concerned about my future. And I just kind of didn't believe him. At the time he might have been right, but I just couldn't think of doing it any other way. And so I did it the way I am. And now it's like I look back on that, I'm like, oh my God, if I had listened to him, I wouldn't be.
But now the only time that he comes up in your memory is when you need it for this anecdote. Otherwise, it's gone, right? It's not
and,
your. It's
well,
not
yeah,
part
and
of
I
your
can
day-to-day
appreciate the
life.
good things about
Yeah.
him, but now it's like, it's like, wow, I have like a giant job in academia.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
wasn't true. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll share one more quick story, just to kind of lighten up things a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
So, back in the '90s, I was on the road with this organist named Jimmy Robbins. They called him the Preacher, and we were in. Now, this is a guy that he had an ego for sure, and we were in Yokohama, Japan, and we were playing, and he was screwing things up, but we weren't saying anything to him, but he was starting to blame us, blame the band. And this went on for like 3 or 4 nights. Finally, after the 4th night, he called myself and the drummer in, and he says, "You guys are fired." And I'm like, okay. Yokohama, Japan, we haven't been paid, nothing. So I kind of knew that he was all kind of up in his head. So sometimes like when somebody has an ego, you have to kind of look past them and see what's really at the root of it. And he was nervous. He was headlining this whole thing, and he was nervous. And I said, "All right, Preacher, well, I mean, I've really enjoyed playing with you, but, I guess, we can't just end like this. We should go out and have a drink." And we went out, and I had one, he had several, and we got a call in our hotel room the next morning. "Rehearsal at 10 a.m. And so we were back in the band. So sometimes you have to kind of look, kind of past what's going on. Because, it's like with all of us. We can, You know, you can have something going on in your life that's causing you to act some way that somebody else doesn't really know, and you might interpret it as ego, but sometimes you got to look past it.
It sounds like you had a question, and I wanted to make sure because you performed for us that we get time for your question.
It's a follow-up question. So if ego and like people doubting you or like saying like, I guess these quote unquote nasty things, like do you ever like look back now like how helpful that is to like for it to make you progress even further? Like, do you think of that in that way, or it's just like?
Yeah. I mean, I do, because like, I think what I see is exactly what Tom saw with that person who said that. He was afraid he was being left behind. He was afraid that things were changing. And he used to be like, you know, this person that everybody went to for advice, and now he's got these students who want to do something that he doesn't feel comfortable with. And it was really hard for him. And now we're friends, like we're friendly, you know.
Yeah.
So that happens.
Yeah, I just want to tag on to that and be like, you know, negative. You know, it can fuel you when somebody says or does something in a negative way. But the most important thing is to try and just see past every situation that is in your way. You know, if there's something in your way, try and see past it, right? And also not to, you know, take criticism, but don't let it change your approach. You know, don't let it change. If you're like, but I think I am right about a general idea, you know, make sure that it doesn't change your path completely. Because if you got something you want to do, that's what school and everything is there to facilitate, right? And so if you've got something you want to do, you need to listen, but you also need to keep that core there. And so it's like, you know, just see past whatever person might be standing in your way and saying you can't. Try and find a way to see past it, right? And just that's I think that's really important. That's something that I wish that I could give, like Tom said, because you get to a certain age where you're just looking at it like none of that stuff mattered, and it mattered so much to me, you know. And you see people getting into fights about stuff that is, you just remove yourself and think back and think, what do I want for the future? What do I want for my family? What do I want for my life, right? And that's what matters, right? And you've got to, and that focus will give you strength when somebody says, I don't know if you should play that style. And you think, well, I like this style, or this is my style, or I need to express this style, right?
I think what you said is so important, because it helps fuel the compassion that you had. Tom's always been great at this. Like, every time there was conflict, that people were disgruntled teaching at this festival, it was always like, let's go hang out. Let's like talk about how you're really feeling, you know. I mean, do you feel underappreciated? Do you feel stressed? Do you feel overwhelmed? Maybe that person's feeling that way too. And like Will just said, like, sometimes these moments, they help clarify for you what you care about, and then also allow you to be a little compassionate to that person so that you can let that go and focus on what you care about.
Yeah, you should always, it's fine to acknowledge what other people might say and think, but and this is a lifelong pursuit. Yeah. You know, you need to also kind of control, it's a lot about mind control.
Yeah.
And about controlling, you know, how you feel about you. Someone can say that, you can almost like, well, maybe I am like that. But you have to sort of acknowledge it, but then acknowledge and tap into who you are.
Right.
And don't let that kind of stuff define you.
Right. Okay, so in the interest of, you know, the students who've been patient, and I know people, we could probably keep it going, but I do want to make sure that we, in the interest of time, that we applaud our group here. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, and we really appreciate it. And I hope that you took something away about the art of the guitar, the art of being a musician. Tom, any final notes or thought? I'd like to thank the Connexion grant for
Project
supporting us.
Connexion for supporting this. I'd like to thank Will for moderating and putting this whole thing together.
Woo!
I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Jessica Bowman, who did the design for the beautiful poster.
Woo!
We so appreciate it.
Yeah, all right. So thank you all very much. All right, take care.
Thank you.